as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stockbox interview. Darren Hazelwood, the CEO of Panther Metals, is joining me today on Stockbox. Darren, it's a pleasure to have you on again. How are you?
I'm very well, Mark. Yourself?
Yes, I'm doing very well indeed as well, Darren. So lots of things been happening with Panther. We spoke just before Christmas where you were wishing all shareholders a happy and prosperous new year. And I'm sure 2021 will pan out to be so like that. And of course, you started the year very well. We had a chat with Charlie, the geologist from SI Capital. And that podcast we did went down very well. That was focused, of course, on the Hemlo projects over in Canada. So bring us up to speed. What's been going on? You've had some news in Australia and some news on Mongolia again in Australia. What's the latest, Darren?
Yeah. So just touching on Charlie's podcast, it was good. It was very good. I think all investors, I would certainly point investors to that. Charlie's a very knowledgeable guy. He's been involved both on the ground and now on a corporate level, and his independence speaks for itself. But you know, I sat back and listened to that and was quite infused by it myself. And he's clearly done his research. He's clearly grasped and got an idea of what we're seeing. We obviously have to be certain in any statements we make, but certainly that hopefully gave people an idea of while internally we're excited about what we've got and what we're seeing and where we think that's all going in Canada. It's quite a remarkable area, and the level of interest that's kicked off over there isn't a surprise to us. I think I've probably highlighted that before. I guess the biggest surprise is that it did go quiet for so long. And that's just historic. You know, when Hemlo was discovered in the mid-'80s, there was this vast staking rush, and everybody that staked the ground there got in, but in reality they didn't have the financial clout to actually do any work. So as a result, Hemlo developed, Hemlo was producing, and there was no other work going on around there because nobody had the capital behind them to actually really get into the ground and do anything. And all that's happened now is over time those people have either surrendered their claims or vended them into something else, and it's all it's just gradually developed, and people have gone back to these areas, reviewed it, and gone, we've got to be in there, and we are part of that. But probably in the very, very early stages, we got in, and it's developed very, very quickly. So now that's very pleasing.
Yeah, and I mean, Charlie, it's always great that when we speak to Charlie, because he gets very excited, very enthused, and he does know his stuff. He really does, and he knows what to look out for, and he always keeps a close eye on how things are developing. And he was very enthusiastic about what's going on at Panther's projects over there in the Hemlo area, and he'll be keeping a close eye on that for sure, and we'll be talking to him again. I'm absolutely sure about as things develop over there. And you're right about the interest. There's, of course, another Power Metal Resources, another exploration company on the AIM market, took some land as well around the area. So there's definitely it seems to be a very good place to be exploring at the moment.
Power picked up the land that they now border us on our eastern edge, and certainly from my perspective and from the companies, I think we all know that Power are what you probably call a noisy neighbour.
Okay.
And that's meant in a great way. Their communication network and how they get the get the story across, and how Paul drives that is something to hold, and one of the biggest compliments you can give anybody in the market. He's out there, he's communicating, he's telling everyone, and for us to go from having a prospector that isn't working in the market and owning the land to having, as I say, a noisy neighbour is fantastic. And I'm certainly looking forward to watching the news flow there that I'm sure will run alongside our news flow as we look to develop the project as well. So no, I think that's a good thing for the UK and for both companies actually.
Okay, and what about what's going on in Australia, Darren? Because you've had some news recently at the start of this year. You had some appointments to the board in Australia, and of course you've got a targeted soil sampling program at Morolia. So what's going on down under?
Yeah, the appointment of Dan and Ranko to the subco board, which already is exceptionally strong. Really is to give people an idea of how, not just to give them an idea, but it should tell people of just how seriously we're taking this. And also how seriously down in Australia our assets are viewed. You don't get to build a board like we have in Australia, and I include Dan and Ranko in there, without having some pretty serious geology and some pretty serious confidence behind the projects that we've got and what their potential offers. And that's what that's all about. Dan especially Dan's been everywhere in Western Australia. He knows absolutely everybody. And there isn't a lot goes on that Dan doesn't know or doesn't know of. His reach is remarkable, and whilst he wouldn't be known in the UK, he would certainly be a well-known figure in Australia. And for him to be willing to come on and help us develop and help us move that forward is as I say, can only be a compliment to the assets that we've got in reality. Because people don't want to waste their time. Time is a precious commodity, and to get those on at this stage should send an indication to people in the UK market about what the feeling is regarding those assets in Australia. And Ranko, of course, corporately is a very rare beast, and he's in his own right built up his own company, and he's an exceptionally skilled, should we say, finance person. He's obviously an accountant, but he's an accountant with the commercial slant and with the ability to drive things in a commercial way as well. So it just strengthens everything, and it underlines everything I've always said. That there are certain elements to a business that you need. Not all of them are going to be dreadfully exciting for everyone, but you need to have the networks, you need to have the ability to do it, you need to have the financial controls, and we can now tick every single box. We've got Dr. David Groves, ex-head of the Australian Geological Society, Karim Senna, who's taken greenfield gold all the way through to profitable gold production. We've now got Dan, we've got Ranko. Seriously impressive, and that's what it's about. It's about strengthening it to give us the ability to drive the business forward, but in a controlled manner.
Okay, now let's just take a moment down to perhaps look beyond the news, and maybe can we take a slightly bigger picture view of Panther and what the company and what you as the CEO of the company want to achieve, in terms of the business strategy, broader opportunities, more of a global, longer term view. What's the sort of aim, the vision?
Yeah, but that's a big question. Obviously, I would probably be more reserved in answering this than most, but there are certain things that you need, and there are lots of different paths you can walk down in this industry. But to grow something substantial, and none of those different paths, that there's anything wrong with those, by the way, but as a business, we need to aim for critical mass from which to grow from, and that's really work in progress for us. But we've also got to remain sort of flexible enough to be able to strike. I guess in terms, it's big enough to cope, but not too bureaucratic. And one of the most critical aspects of any business is how your strategy evolves, because any business that you do, to really grow it, it has to be an evolving process. And I think everybody that's grown a business would agree with that. You have to have your parameters, but you also have to have that. You also have to recognise very early on that it has to be evolving. Well, the policies and the structure that you've got today won't necessarily enable you or work for you tomorrow if things and how things develop. So, see, if you don't take that view, you're just going to become another member of the crowd. And once you become a member of the crowd, you're not really sailing your own ship. But in my opinion, there's three key elements in the creation of a successful mining company. And one of those, you've got to have the financial strength that's going to enable you to grow. And you've got to have the people to find, develop and deliver commercially viable ore bodies. And I guess, and the last one would be, you've got to have ore reserves. You're an explorer or mining company, you have to have an ore reserves.
So can you break those down a bit more for us, Darren?
In our case, I say the financial strength, and in our case, that'd be access to capital, but quality capital. But that shows through in many ways. I ask myself, are we being offered, or do we have access to money? Yes. And then you're looking at, is that money at the right levels? And will that money coming into us add more value? And by adding more value, that gives us access to higher quality projects, and increasing our value again. And that gives us access to higher quality capital. So you've created the momentum to build a really substantial company then through those processes of the capital you take, at what levels you take it. And also, is there ways that you don't become reliant on the main company for that capital? And that can come in many forms in this industry. It can be through joint ventures. There are many different types, and I guess that takes us onto the second one, where you have to have the experience, the knowledge, and really the feel to make discoveries. What I mean by the feel is, it's the same as business. You can know every single textbook way of developing and moving forward and growing, and geology is the same. You can look at all the trigger points that lead to where by the textbook the discovery should be. But very often the greatest businesses and the greatest discoveries are made by a feel, and you can't buy that. It's something that people have in them. It's kind of an innate ability. But I think that's exactly what we've got as a business, in the geological side, and also at a corporate level. And that's why I point people to our board, and Karim and his ability to, as we've already mentioned, to take grassroots through to profitable production. David Groves, what he's achieved and what he's done. A remarkable guy that's been involved in many discoveries. He's published 500 times, either as the author or co-author. He's a serious guy. And then you've got Nick O'Reilly. He's been involved at corporate level, many companies and different discoveries. And now in Australia, you've got Dan and Renko, all in one form or another have been involved in developing companies through discovery to commercialization. And we have that team. So and that's really important. And on all reserves, your scorecard in the market is your share price ultimately, or your market capitalization. And the metric used for this will be your oil reserves once you get to a certain level. Now we're clearly not at that level as a business yet, but what we have is everything in place to enable us to make those discoveries to take us to that level. But ultimately, and that's what I mean by evolving and recognizing these things really early doors. And you need the right teams to achieve this in geological and financial terms. And it's about putting that platform in place. Look, this is a high risk, high reward industry, okay? And we all recognise that. That's why we invest in it. But what is our job to do is actually lessen that risk. And the way that we lessen that risk is by having the knowledge and the understanding in place as we're deploying once we're deploying that capital. And in this case, we're deploying the capital to make discoveries in geological locations, okay? And we've got those things in place. And it's managing the risk, and that's what we're doing.
So you're saying there about evolving, and almost can we liken it to flights of stairs? You climb a certain flight of stairs and you get to a certain level, and then from that level you can then build from there and go up sort of the next flight of stairs. Is that a good analogy?
Yeah, oh no, absolutely. Yeah. I often talk about levels, and that you, as I touched on with the high risk, high reward. Things can change in this game with one drill result, and it can change to a massive degree. That there are very few industries in the world that can match that. But what you've got to make sure you're doing all the time is you've got to be ready for that to happen. And you've got to have everything in place to enable that to happen. So to move through those levels, if you don't have this in place, then you're risking, I guess in market terms, you call it a spike. The classic drill hole, up you go, down. Well, actually, what we're doing, we're putting a foundation in place. So when we get these discoveries, that we can back it up all the way through. A great example would be what Chris Taylor's done at Great Bear Resources. He's backed that up all the way through, all the way up, and that's what we are doing, and that's exactly how we're doing. Look, I can give you a story. It's actually one of my favourite stories in the industry, I guess, of how close things can be in this, and it revolves around Norman Keevil, and he's one of the legends of the Canadian mining industry, and the first real discovery he made, that would eventually lead to Teck Resources, right, which are multi-billion-dollar company. There was lots of corporate events that have happened since this, but this was, he was a mining consult. He was a consultant, and he had some land in Ontario, and in the 1950s, Anaconda, then a very big player, they optioned the property that Norman was involved with, and they drilled the property, but with their drill hole, they missed a copper ore body by meters, literally by meters. And actually, what they did, it was actually two copper ore bodies, and they drilled between the two.
Okay.
And ultimately, to cut a long story, Anaconda returned the property. Okay. And eventually that property became the Temagami mine. And today tech is worth billions. But for just a few meters, story would be very, very different. And that's the kind of fine margins you're dealing in this business. It's these very margins that we're aware of, and we've got to prepare for. And that preparation is everything. And we've got the experience, we've got the business savvy, the business knowledge, and this all constitutes to a team that can drive us through those levels, but underpinning the business at every single stage, so that those that get in early are getting the rewards. It's not a situation where your market cap is growing, but so's your shares in issue. So in reality, no one's winning, everyone's kind of just staying still. Well, that's not the way that I want to do it. And there are so many opportunities out there, Mark. Everybody's out there looking for the GGP discovery. Of course they are. And that's what we all want. And that what an amazing discovery that was. But there's also there are all different ways of doing it, and that's what I mean by there are so many different paths. But on that path, what we've got to make sure we're doing is not destroying our capital base along that way. So, you look at all bodies. Everybody's looking for the big discovery, which is exactly what we're doing. But you know what? There's plenty of opportunity out there for with smaller deposits that you've got potential processing capacity within the area, within the district, that can be done, that can be mined and processed, very profitably. That's another area that is often missed. But the impact that would potentially have on a company that's market cap is 10 million against a company whose market cap is 200 million is completely different. And like I say, when you've got the knowledge and experience that we have, we can go through down a few paths as we look to drive and finance this and structure it. So it is genuinely exciting times, but it has to be in a controlled manner as well, because of course you have to make sure that you're not losing touch with what you're doing.
So really what you're saying is a constant steady growth, growing the balance sheet, growing the market cap, that enables new opportunities for the company to expand and to continue to build on the founding assets, the founding elements of the company, and continue to become, what would you say, more stable?
I would, I think it's how we run this is it's a very stable company, but historically we've seen some fantastic opportunities, and they haven't really been available to us because of the size of the business.
Okay, yeah.
And we'll continue to see those opportunities because of the quality of our board, and we'll see more and more actually, because people are understanding within the industry what Panther are about. But you have to be at a certain level to consider some of the opportunities without going, so the higher market cap we are, the more likely we are to the better and the greater quality project we can bring in. And by design, the higher our market cap goes, and it just goes on and on. So absolutely underpinning the balance sheet, and the balance sheet gives us the platform to go to a new level. And that new level, as long as we've done it right, which is what we will do, then our balance sheet grows again, and that enables us to go to the next level. And that's how you build great companies.
Yeah, I think stable wasn't really the right word, because Panther definitely, you can tell a business is stable. It's probably more like you say the levels, or solidifying is maybe a better word, or as a as a building gets built, more concrete gets put in, that kind of thing, just constantly moving up those levels and really forming a solid base and structure really going forward. So I mean, that sounds really amazing, Darren, and the opportunities that you are coming across, as you say, due to your, the people on your board that you're not quite ready to take advantage of yet. So the bigger vision is to be able to do that. How do you plan on getting there? You mentioned about having teams on the ground and really making sure you do things right to get that discovery. But what kind of measures have you got in place now, or actions are you taking right now to enable you to bring that longer term goal into reach?
I think you touched on earlier that I didn't ignore on purpose, but the you see in the auger drilling campaign happening in Mongolia, that's we're looking to see if we can. That's 15-kilometer stretch, untested. Now, if we can find any evidence of mineralization through this auger campaign over 15 kilometers, and that's then connecting two separate parts of that system, that becomes a very, very big and exciting system. And that's a perfect example of how we're doing it. It's structured. It's going through the different levels of discovery and making sure that what we're doing is done in the right way, so that we're not burning through cash needlessly, and we know exactly what we're looking for and why we're looking for it in such a manner.
Does that form from the teams you assemble? Is that a key element of that strategy?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When you've got high-level people working together and working on projects and working on how to advance them, what we're after, why we're after it, it answers its own questions, really.
Okay. And I'm seeing a lot of chatter these days and headlines about the commodity super cycle. How do you feel about that? I know you mentioned it before when we talk about gold, for example, on the interviews, but what do you think we're seeing the start, or we're already in it maybe, of the next super cycle in mining and commodities? What's your take on that?
I don't know. I'm not qualified to comment on a super cycle. Sort of across the board, I can see why that's being called. There are definitely sound judgments behind why people would say that. But I guess I'm more focused on precious metals, and ultimately there is a limited amount. I think, as it happens, I do think the EV market is here now, and that is just going to grow and grow and grow. We're seeing the car manufacturers coming out almost daily now and saying by 2030 or 2035 at the latest, all their fleets will be electric. So look, there's things there. So you could start to argue, as I say, about the commodity super, but in precious metals, look, the system. I'm on record as the system was showing financial strain in September of 2019. Okay, and onwards through that autumn, but it was kept very low key. That the Fed had to come into the debt markets overnight and pump money in, and no one really got to the bottom of that. But it definitely showed that the debt markets were under strain. And that then obviously, then we started getting reports through from China regarding coronavirus and the implications on the world's markets. I was very negative on the debt levels and the world markets already before coronavirus, and now with the amount of printing of money. The debt levels, and the governments have moved debt from the individual onto the governments themselves. you've got the Dow trading at, I think it's 200% of GDP, which is the highest in history. That's because people have got the cash to pump in, but the reason they've got the cash is because the government across the globe are simply creating money, and this isn't a real world scenario. You know, we are living so far beyond our means now, and there is an argument that the problem is so big that actually you can now ignore it. And we never sorted things out from the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. What we did was push the problem down the road.
Yep.
With coronavirus, that's just exasperated it, and I do find it a bit scary when you start looking at the American government and the unfunded government liabilities. Then it just goes into numbers that really should make people wince. And we've got the same in the UK. Yeah. But as a result of that, anyways, people are going to want security. Okay, they're going to want security, and it's very often the people that are the wealthiest that the first to start looking for that. And we've seen issues around silver and gold, and deliveries of those. And I think that as time develops, people, I noticed the comics they've got record numbers of people requesting delivery, and that's the only reason people are requesting delivery is because they haven't got confidence in the ability of institutions to deliver against what they believe they own in a vault. Otherwise, why would you want somebody turning up with a boatload of gold or silver bars at your front door? It makes no sense. You know, you're better off paying the tiny holding fees, and it's in a vault in Fort Knox or in the Bank of England, wherever it should be. But we're already seeing signs of people losing confidence in that. And I think that as the government start to withdraw some of the financial supports that we've seen and that we are seeing, that then you will start to create momentum. Now, whether inflation is going to take off, I suspect it's got to at some point, because the amount of money that's been pumped in. But the Fed have said that they're not going to raise interest rates to tackle inflation. The Bank of England have indicated the same. That in fact, the Bank of England have indicated they may go negative interest rates. And of course, all this is designed to do is to get people spending the capital that they've got. Well, however it pans out. So how inflation pans out, that's an open debate. But the fact that governments are now trying to force people to spend their cash, and what people will do, I think that will start to set off a chain reaction where people will start to understand that there isn't necessarily the underlying confidence that one would expect, and as a result of that they're going to start buying things that they can have confidence in, and those will be precious metals, and they will store them themselves. But
no, you're right. People will start to store them themselves, and I think we can already see that happening. And you know, why not? I think it is getting scary how governments have created all this debt and effectively all this paper money. And there's talk of digital euros coming out. How that may affect the current euro, I don't know whether it's a chance to remarket against something. Who knows? But it's coming within 5 years. I think we're going to have a digital euro. That's what I'm hearing from the ECB anyway. So yeah, it's prudent to protect your wealth in something that is proven to hold that over a long time. So I'd agree with you on there, and I'm hoping there's a super cycle coming because I've been waiting long enough for it, and Panther should be well positioned with the project that you have. I wonder if we can just finish, Darren, on you sort of stated that objective about moving up levels. You were quite clear about how you wanted to keep building on that as and when the balance sheet increases and the market cap increases and new opportunities open up, etc. But I wonder, just a couple of questions. How do you plan to achieve that? What will you do to measure that? Not on a daily basis, but maybe on I don't know, maybe a quarterly basis, or are there any measures you have in place to measure and monitor progress of how you're progressing towards that vision?
The only scorecard to keep over the longer term is your share price.
Okay.
And I don't buy into anybody saying anything else. Now, one thing you do have to bear in mind within that is where you sit within the cycles regarding what you're doing as a business. So you have to give certain leeways, and as with any statement, that there are always going to be mitigating circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
So I would look at companies that over the last maybe 5 or 6 years, let's say pre the turn of 2020, and you can look and say, well, if you're using that as a measure, these haven't done this. The market was different then. So you have to build that tolerance in. And it's those that have grown from there, because what they did during some really, really, really tough and lean years, they still continued to build their asset base, and then they was able to benefit from that once the market turned. But at the same time, over the longer term, it's always got to be share price. That's the one that you judge your scorecard on. That's what we're there for,
Yeah.
We've got to. I've got to grow the capital, the market capital of my business to enable me to go through the levels. And to do that, I've got to bring the market along with me. To bring the market along with me, I've got to do things the right way. To do things the right way, I've got to have the right people in place. To have the right people in place, they've got to believe in the business and the model that we've got. And that's what we're doing.
Okay. And finally then, and I always hesitate about asking this, and I certainly will not hold you to any timeline, and I'm not asking you to be specific at all, because making timeline predictions in this market is very dangerous, and expectation management should be the top priority of every CEO, in my opinion. But
absolutely, and we all make mistakes on that, Mark. I will.
Yeah, I know.
We get the gun put to our heads,
but I mean, you must have an idea though for the longer term vision. Do you have an idea? I mean, what sort of thing are you talking? 5 years? I don't know.
The longer term vision for what?
For your vision to build Panther, to get it up the sort of levels, each story, so to speak.
I think at every stage we should be able to do things quicker and quicker. Panther was refinanced at the equivalent to 2 pence in March 2018. That was done at a valuation of 480,000. Today our valuation, nearly 3 years later, stands at 8 or 9 million. There's been a huge amount of work gone into that. And we've built a fantastic boards and structures and assets. But I also recognise that being at that level gives us more access to better and bigger things. So I would expect that we can grow at more speed. The bigger our market cap, the bigger the opportunity.
So it's kind of exponential, like an exponential curve.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Remember, we spent a long time internally working on moving our listing from Next to the main market. And I, in my own mind, I still say that we're just over a year old in reality.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've said many times, you know, I've got an investment in this company, and I want to get a return that won't just look after my kids, but will look after my grandchildren and their grandchildren. And as a result of that, I've got to build something quite substantial.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much, Darren, for that chat there about your vision for Panther going forward. And I'm sure we'll be talking again as things progress and as news comes out. And yeah, thank you very much.
We sure will, Mark. And look, thanks again, and have a good one.
Thank you for listening to this Stockbox interview. For more information, interviews and videos, visit our website at stockboxmedia.com or give us a follow on Twitter by searching @StockboxMedia.